Hey everybody, welcome to another IAIB Spotlight here on the IAIB website, ibroadcastnetwork.org, and of course, broadcasting live on gfqlive.tv. I'm Andrew Zarian, and today I have a very special guest, someone that I've become quite friendly with over the last couple of years. We've spoken about podcasting, we've spoken about new media, we've spoken about the future of podcasting on Xbox, and if you're a regular on What the Tech, you watch our show, What the Tech, on the GFQ Network, you see the name Rob Greenlee in the chat room. We have Rob Greenlee today on the show. How you doing, Rob?
Doing great, Andrew. It's fantastic to be on the show. I think I've been on this this show that you do. I think the last time we did this was at the New Media Expo back in New York. So yeah. It's great to do it again and kind of get caught up with stuff. I'm a big fan of the GFQ network and what you're doing there, and watch a lot of your shows. So I think this is a great honor for me to be on your show with you.
I apologize for some of our shows, Rob. In advance.
You don't have to do that. I think you're great. I mean, it's a great variety of shows. I think it's very unusual in the podcasting space to have a network that has a variety of of different types of shows. It seems like a lot of them now are very focused on a particular type of genre, right?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people. And by the way, let me just do a proper introduction to Rob. Rob is the co-host of the New Media Show. And he is the content manager for Windows Phone and Zune.
With podcasts.
With podcasts.
Yeah.
So just a quick little intro, which we're going to get to all that. But I do agree with you. I think a lot of people like to stick to one topic, and they expand, like technology, for example, which there's a bajillion tech shows everywhere, online. And I feel like I could get the same information. Listen, there are some people that do phenomenal with it. But for the most part, I could get that same information on Engadget or The Verge.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I going to tune in for tech news? Unless you're offering something different.
Yeah, and I think people tune in to different shows and channels based on people that they like. So I think that's a big part of it too.
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of these shows. You're obviously featuring content. You're listening to a lot of podcasts. Let's talk about the tech stuff. And I'm sure many of our viewers are doing a tech podcast, and nothing against it. I do agree that personality sells your product. I got an email the other day from a guy, and he was telling me that, he does this tech podcast, and he does tech news, and he sticks to a very journalistic way of presenting the news, where he just literally just reads the headlines. And he's telling me, he's like, well, I don't understand why I'm not getting more than 20 or 30 people that watch or listen. And it's pretty simple. You're not adding any kind of character or personality to bring people back. You're just literally reporting the news. Do you see a lot of that when you're, going through a lot of these podcasts to feature and to kind of learn what they're doing? Or do you think more people are realizing that personality does matter and they need to sell it with who they are?
Yeah, I think the shows that typically don't do as well are the ones that are not very focused in what they're doing. They're trying to do too much, and they tend to ramble too much. I think it's a delicate balance that I think a show needs to strike, where they're focused, but they're also spontaneous, and they're natural, and they're fun, and those kind of things that build a relationship with the audience. But you also have to deliver some value to the audience for them to keep coming back. So it's this kind of teeter-totter of kind of balancing personality and personal connection with content that's valuable to the listener. And I think the shows that walk that line and keep that balance level are the ones that are successful.
No, I agree with you 100%. Let's go a little bit into your history with radio and broadcasting. You actually started out on the radio.
Yeah, actually, I have no background in broadcasting or anything like that. I just was a guy that really a marketing guy. I have a marketing degree that just had a fascination with the online world back in '96 and stuff, like a lot of people that got involved in using the Netscape browser, and then just it became a passion of mine as an avenue for marketing. And then I started doing some consulting around helping people optimize their websites for search engines, and thought I would just do a radio show. I walked into a radio station, a small radio station in the Seattle market here, and paid to be on the air on Saturday mornings, and brought in a couple other guys with me that were also passionate about the online world, and we just created a show. It's called the Web Talk Guys.
And this is 1996.
1999 is when I started the Web Talk Guys show, and it was just on the air. It didn't have any connection with the, well, I shouldn't say that. I made the show available after we did it on the air. I actually brought a cassette into the studio, and they basically recorded the show onto a cassette tape. And then I brought that cassette tape home and played it through like a $19 cassette player into my computer and made an MP3 file.
So you literally had to sit there and re-record the show digitally on your computer. Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, so that's how, and most of the cassette tapes back then were only 45 minutes, and I was doing an hour-long show, so I actually had to have 2 tapes, and then I had to kind of splice them together to create one show. So it was a very humble time, and then I used Shoutcast as a kind of like a on-demand live streaming platform for my show. So I would basically establish off my website a time when that show was going to air, right? Trying to simulate kind of like a live broadcast, and it would just play off of my cassette player through Shoutcast out there, and that's how I started streaming.
That's amazing. What were the numbers like?
I posted an MP3 file off of the site too, which each show, and you could download directly.
So what were the numbers like? Like, we talk about podcasts having thousands and tens of thousands of downloads now, or to kind of to do a good show. I mean, you at least need like 1,000 subscribers. What were the numbers like in 1999 when the term podcasting didn't exist? It was no mainstream crossover. Maybe there were a few people doing anything based on the internet as far as broadcasting their radio show there. Yeah. What was that like? Are we talking tens or are we talking hundreds?
Well, actually, it grew pretty fast. I have to say, I was surprised that there was only a handful of shows out there that were doing anything online, around tech at the time. So I was part of a fairly small group of nationally syndicated kind of tech and computer shows that were out there. So yeah, the first year I was making my show available online, I was probably getting maybe 10,000 downloads.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
And then by about 2000, this kind of jumping ahead a little bit, by about 2003, 2004, my total audience across my online syndication, my satellite syndication, I was getting about 1.3 million listeners weekly to the show.
That is, that's astonishing, actually, to hear that. In 1999, 2000.
Well, it was a rarity. There weren't too many other shows out there that were actually covering the web and the internet. And that's what we focused on, was talking about the cutting edge stuff. And I was getting top level guests from Microsoft, from Symantec, from all of the, pets.com, all those kind of guys that were still going, just prior to the .com collapse.
What's amazing is that, I feel like over the last decade, more of the regular person has kind of become a little bit more techie, right? Having a cell phone in 2000, you kind of had to know how to use a cell phone. Or if you were, going online and finding podcasts, you had to know how to go and find a radio show online.
Yep.
It's unbelievable to me that many people knew how to find it when, the concept of social networking did not exist. You didn't have an iTunes. You didn't have a Windows phone directory. Things like that didn't exist. So people actually had to go and find it.
Yeah, it was all through the search engines, all through Google, and part of what I was really good at back then was helping people get found in the search engines. So I kind of leveraged that skill to really focus my content on keywords that were searchable in the search engines, and would also embed the audio in my articles. So we actually did a combination of things. We wrote articles for newspapers, we wrote articles for our website, and then we would have conversations with guests, and then we would basically transcribe those conversations and put them out into newspaper articles that would actually refer people back to our website to be able to listen to the interview. So we had this kind of synergy of offline and online kind of promotion for the radio show. and it actually got a lot of exposure that way. And that was my strategy. And then I also got on a lot of live streaming radio stations and things like that would take my MP3 file and they would just play it in their rotation. And then also up on satellite on about 15 broadcast radio stations. Then I got picked up by CNET Radio back when they had radio stations.
I remember that, yeah.
And got aired twice every weekend. So it was really kind of the early days. And the other big thing about it that I think is gone now is kind of the mystique of the online world.
How does it, how does this all work?
Yeah, and back then there were movies that were out that were kind of a little bit, I would say, kind of romanticizing the web and the internet as this mysterious thing, that it created this culture that was quite different than we see today, in the movies and things like that. So people had this mysterious kind of perception of the web and the internet, and we totally played into that. And then also trying to bring in the entertainment side, having guests on from like X-Files and that kind of a culture connection is what we tried to do in the show as well.
Do you feel that the radio show elevated you to that level, or would it have been possible for you to just do it from your house and just do phoners with these guests and have your co-hosts come in and just pretty much do what we're doing now? Would that have been possible in 2000?
Well, I actually did that. I only did the show live in the studio at the radio station for about a year, maybe year and a half. And I took it out of the radio station and built my own studio. I got some venture funding, and I built a studio in downtown. Well, it's a city here in the Seattle area, and we basically started to build a business around this. I got partners, and so our business was to help other people create online shows.
How was it to monetize at that point? Was it as difficult as now? Was it easier then because it was still new and people really were? I guess it was also the .com boom where there was money to spend. But what was it like to monetize? How would someone monetize at that point?
Well, it's not really too much different then than it is now. I mean, one of the struggles that I had was monetizing downloads versus my broadcast audience. Because back then people just didn't really know that much about online, radio shows and download kind of distribution. It was actually before there was kind of podcasting.
Yeah.
So you had this kind of this. It was very, very new. But what I would do is I would roll up all of my numbers based on what I was told from the radio stations of what my audience was based on ratings and things like that, and I would put a package together. What I fell into, and I think that still exists today, is that buyers that buy advertising around content like this are looking at it like a sponsored link, where it's really kind of a pay for performance kind of model is what they were looking for all the time. And I really had a struggle with my sponsors and my advertisers to convince them that that's not the right way to look at this. The right way to look at this is you're branding your message over a long period of time, because my show archives were available and actually still are that have embedded advertising in them. So a person would listen to my sponsor message, but they may not buy for a month or two, right?
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, it's the billboard mentality, right? I mean, you're driving down the highway and you see the billboard there every single week. You're not instantly pulling your car to the side and saying, oh my gosh, I got to go buy a can of Coke right now. Doesn't happen. It's maybe in a month from now when you go back to the supermarket, you're going to buy a can of Coke compared to Pepsi because that's what you're looking to get.
Yeah, but that's what the advertisers wanted back then, was instant results, right? And I think that still exists today, and I think it's a perception thing around the online piece of digital, right? That's what you expect there. But if you look at billboards, like you said, billboards or radio, they tend to think more about branding and the value of that in the long run, right? And that's what was difficult about it early on. And I hope that that's changing now a little bit, where people realize that it's not a direct response medium.
It depends on the advertiser, Rob. I mean, we battle
That's
that
true.
all the time. I mean, we've had just recently, and this is actually you're a good person to talk about this. We had an advertiser a couple months ago, and we did the ads, and it was the same audience that we've had all the time, and they've taken out ads before, and they've always got a solid result. They weren't happy with the result for whatever reason. And it was after 3 weeks they weren't happy. I mean, they expect us. I said, you know what, give it another month or two. Watch, because a lot of people fall behind. It's the summer. People are going to catch up to the ad. The numbers were pretty solid. But I told them, I'm like, don't worry about it. Look, it'll come back. They pull that from the ad, and they go, okay, if we see a result from this ad within the next month, we'll come back. They got a huge result because that ad, that show, for whatever reason, got viral, and a lot of people listened to it. It went from having 25,000 downloads to about 55,000 downloads, and they saw a tremendous boost. And they go, "Wow, you're right." And it's baffling to me that you have to explain this to an industry that understands how advertising works. It's their business, and you have to tell them, like, listen, they're not going to go and buy it right now. That's just how it is. You might get some, but maybe not right now.
Yeah, I think it really gets back to these points need to be proven to people, right? And oftentimes you get a lot of new people that are looking at the space to advertise and sponsor, and they just don't know this yet, right? I mean, it's been an issue for what, since I started selling advertising.
Yeah.
It's been a long time now, and it just takes a long time for these things to be perceived and understood before you start seeing a change. And I don't know. It sounds like you're still experiencing some struggles with that.
It depends who it is. I mean, there are some people that really get it, and you'll get another one that you think that's going to understand how it works, and they really don't, and they care about. I had an advertiser. We're not doing the ads with them, but they were getting results. And they were astonished that they were getting results, but they weren't getting any clicks to that URL. Like, people are using our promo code, obviously, because that's how they're able to track it, but they weren't going to that designated URL that we had on our website. And I explained, I'm like, listen, nobody's sitting there and clicking on it from my website. It's a radio show. I'm like, if you're advertising on the Howard Stern show, are you going to say we're not getting any clicks from the Howard Stern show's website? No, because nobody's listening there. Yeah. So it's fascinating that there are people that don't get it. But since we're talking about distribution and putting your shows other places, how did that impact podcasting in the early days? I mean, now we got this term podcasting, but what was the first distribution method for an internet broadcast that really changed it for people? Because I came in after the whole iTunes boom and Windows Phone, and Windows Phone now, but like Zune and all these other directories had come and gone. But what was that initially like, and what was the first one that changed everything?
Well, it's hard to know where to start. I mean, if you go, it depends on how far back you go, and I think if you go look at the Wikipedia page for podcasts, it'll give you a little bit of a glimpse into the precursors of podcasting. Because yes, I was involved in a lot of these these platforms. Like, I don't know if very many people know, but Microsoft actually had a podcast platform pretty much out there before a lot of people, and was very early in the game. It was a platform called Sync and Go.
Okay.
And I was part of that. My show was part of it. There was only like 2 or 3 radio shows that were part of the Sync and Go platform, and it worked with the Pocket PC. And so you basically run the software on the Pocket PC device with your Windows XP, and you could synchronize video and audio programs to your Pocket PC through this software. It had a catalog and all this stuff. And this was back in 2003.
So very early on.
Yeah, it was way before podcasting. And unfortunately, Microsoft decided to shut it down just like in 2004, 2005,
right
just
before.
as podcasting was starting to take off. So I was really, really frustrated at the time, and I was actually getting paid to have my radio show on the Sync and Go platform because they only had 13 content providers. I told them that they needed to ramp it up, to open it up, and to add a lot more content to it, which would have been more like what we see with what happened to podcasting, with iTunes and with Zune and these aggregator platforms. But there were other ones, and I'm trying to remember the names of them, that also started to do this as well. And I'm just drawing a blank on some of the names of them, but you can actually go, like I said, go to the podcast page on the Wikipedia, and you can see all of the precursors to podcast platforms that existed, and oftentimes a lot of those platforms I was involved in very early, with my own show, because it just fit with the demographics of those platforms. They were wanting to get kind of a tech show in there, and there just weren't very many of them around.
Everybody that I speak to that started out in 2004, 2005, 2006, that time, everybody says that Podcast Alley was really the place to put your show at that point.
Yeah.
As soon as I started podcasting, they just shut their doors. Like, it was literally like that week I submitted
Andrew,
my
it was
show.
your fault.
You know what? I may have killed him. I think it was just my awful show that I submitted to Podcast Alley, and that was it. And we're done. And, now we have iTunes, but it's really become all about iTunes. They've really owned the podcasting market. Just recently, we're starting to see some other, podcasting directories and applications kind of gain some traction. But why has it been them? Why are they the main place to go and get your podcast? Even on Windows. I mean, Windows doesn't really have a podcasting platform. You could use the Zune software, but we know what's happening with that. But why has it been iTunes that's kind of owned this market? Was it the pod name, or? I'm just curious.
I think it was the combination of a couple things. I think the iPod was such a dominant thing back in that 2005 timeframe, and then podcasting kind of was born kind of based on the connection with the iPod, as far as its name and how it worked and all that stuff like that. Even though it actually did work with the Windows Media Player and those kind of things, but I think it was just they were the first one to jump on it. That they had a lot of devices in the market, and podcasting back then was very much all about audio, and the iPod was very much a audio platform. I mean, if you think about the early Nanos and the full platform that iTunes had with the iPod line, it was very focused on audio, and that's one thing that was different about Zune when Zune launched, is that Zune had a bigger screen than the iPod had, and
a nicer screen too.
Yeah, and I really saw in the early years of the Zune platform that the video podcasting side was really dominating. And it was also, I think, just because the Zune platform did not have a TV and movie store yet. So when Zune launched, they launched with music first, and then they launched with the podcast area. And that just got huge usage right when they launched that. And that was like 2007 or so. So it was really kind of early, somewhat, in the podcast kind of genre, and it was still kind of a hot thing back then, and that's part of the reason why the whole podcast area that we see today, I mean, even exists at Microsoft. I mean, it was not something that probably would have organically happened at Microsoft. I mean, I tried to get the company to build a podcast kind of experience even going back to 2004 and 5.
Is it because it's, and we've had this discussion obviously off the air a couple times, and I always ask Mom, like, why don't we have a podcasting app on the Xbox? Why don't we have it? But does it really come down to monetization? Is it because they know that they can't make money off of it, therefore it really doesn't matter to them?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a factor, and I also think that there's a perception that there's not enough users that use podcasts to justify the investment. So I think that it's a combination of things. Certainly the company is focused on building billion-dollar businesses, and there is a perception that podcasts are just not a billion-dollar business, though I would say in the long run that they could be wrong about that. But currently today, it has a perception that it's kind of a fringe, kind of a user-generated area, and it just isn't a priority. They're focused on movies, TV, and music, and games, and that's pretty much. They're diving into some other content areas that are kind of lacking in the platform, but those are clearly the focus, at least, of Xbox.
I mean, to me, it's almost like free publicity because, I mean, I never bought my music on iTunes. I really never wanted to buy my music on iTunes, nor did I ever purchase my videos on iTunes. But because I'm in the iTunes ecosystem with my podcast, guess what? Every time I'm in there and I see a song that I like, I just hit buy because I'm already invested into that ecosystem. It's familiar to me. And I feel like if I'm going for, Joe Rogan's show and it's on, Windows Phone, or if it's on Xbox, or I'm able to get the same thing on my laptop, I would be more inclined to purchase my music from Zune or from Windows rather than go to iTunes.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree. I think the whole content ecosystem is a very, very powerful thing, and I think that the company has been a little slow to fully build out the ecosystem that is what users today want, and I do believe that they are working pretty aggressively to fill that in, and I do believe that podcasts are going to be and continue to be part of the mix at the company. I think we're going through a little bit of a lull in that right now, but I'm confident that the company will kind of do the right thing here. I can't really say what that is, but it's been something that I've been pushing and working on at the company for many years, and I think it's just a matter of this two things happening: the podcast market becoming more popular again, better content in it. I think that the exposure the podcasts have kind of garnered here over the last 6 months or so have definitely kept that flame kind of alive at the company, and I'm optimistic that things will expand and improve for podcasting at with Windows Phone and with all the changes that are happening at Microsoft right now. Things are a little bit up in the air in a lot of ways about how groups are going to work together and how things are going to become like this one Microsoft, which is what they've been talking about more and more. I think it's something that definitely needs to happen. And
does that help or hurt the chances of podcasting being on the Windows platform?
I think it'll probably help, but I think that the jury's still out a little bit on that right now. I think it's still a little bit early in the reorg to really understand what the fallout from that might be. I mean, there's a new CEO coming in, and it's about priorities. But the Windows Phone team is very committed to podcasts. It's just how important is the Windows Phone in the scheme of things, right? And they need to pick up some market share for them to have more power in the company. But mobile, right, is the Uber trend. So I'd say that the number one priority for the company at this point would be mobile. So how do they shore up their experience to compete against Apple and Google as a differentiator? I think that's the key question.
Sure. And listen, they have an advantage. They have an advantage over Google, right? Google does not have any kind of podcast integration in Android.
Yeah, well, they don't think they need it because they have YouTube, right?
Yeah.
So, YouTube is their podcast platform. So, and now, here this past week or so, they've announced that they're going to make offline viewing, possible, which basically really, I think, threatens the whole video podcasting side.
In what way? Explain that. That's fascinating.
Well, I think a lot of the reason why people watch video podcasts is, they're podcast users, right? So they're in there looking for content, and they see a video podcast, and they can subscribe to it and get it through their normal processes. Because most users listen to audio primarily. But one of the downsides of YouTube has been is that offline viewing hasn't been possible, and that's one of the downsides of all streaming. Actually, is how do you consume this content if you're on a bus or train that it doesn't have a good internet connection?
I still battle that. I battle that all the time. We have very. It's bizarre for me because for this 3-block radius, there's virtually no cell phone coverage where I live. And it's fine after that. But if I'm trying to, let's say I'm in the car and I'm getting ready to go on a trip and I'm trying to load something up, it's virtually impossible for me. Until I drive and then I got to pull over to kind of set it up, which is a little bit of an annoyance. But yeah, you're right. Offline use is a major factor in getting content.
And that's been one of the strengths of podcasting has been offline viewing or listening. So, and I think Google has recognized that is a factor, though it's probably a declining share of consumption, is important for them to fill out their ecosystem, and podcasts have been there all along. I think one of the big holes in the YouTube area is audio, right? And so it's leaving the door open for podcasting to kind of merge with radio and turn the whole radio experience that we all know of and lots of people dislike into a compelling content area. I think that the future and the opportunity of audio, I think, is huge if it can be done right, and
Absolutely.
What people want now, right?
Let's talk about the trends in internet broadcasting and podcasting and what's happening and the evolution of this. What do you see the trend right now? How is it evolving? Because we've added, we started out doing this live and we added a podcast after. So we kind of did it backwards. But do you think it's the live aspect of broadcasting? Do you think it's video? Where do you see the trend headed?
I think live is becoming more and more important. I probably, if you would have asked me this question 2 or 3 years ago, whether I thought live had any kind of future, I would probably have told you no, because my experience since actually even the early days of the streaming media business, which I was involved in quite a bit, and we didn't really talk about the fact that most of my audience from my radio show going way back was off of streaming media servers. I mean, Real One and the Windows Media Server. I basically got most of my audience through that way. I mean, even more so than on the radio side. So I really think that that live is really kind of where the future of this stuff is, and I think Leo and yourself are right on target. It's about connecting with your audience. I mean, I probably have converted from from watching some of my most favorite shows on demand to trying to schedule them into my schedule to watch them live as a first choice, not a second choice. And if I can't watch it live, then that's when I'll watch it on demand. So, and I think over time more people are going to make that choice if they have the time to do it. If they're busy and working and traveling and things like that, and they can't catch a show, then they'll watch it on demand. But if they can watch it live, I think they will.
But here is the problem with live still. Advertisers have not realized how to monetize on live, or they don't want to yet.
Yeah.
That's the hard part.
Yeah, and I'm not sure why there needs to be a differentiation there. I mean, if the advertising is being embedded in it, just the same as the on-demand piece, why that just can't be rolled up into the number? I mean, I'm not sure why there's this artificial distinguishing characteristic between live and on-demand. In reality, it's still a viewer, right? I mean, if you can track how many people are watching your show to a certain point, right, and then be able to roll that number up and add it with your on-demand side, I think it just adds to your audience. Now, the on-demand side is always going to be a lot bigger. I mean, clearly, I'm sure that's what your numbers show too. But but I think live makes your show, a lot more deep, and it also makes you a better broadcaster too. I mean, Todd Cochran of the Geek News Central podcast also says that too, is that doing your show live makes you a better content provider.
I did an interview yesterday with somebody, and it was generally about the business aspect of GFQ and what I've done with the IAIB, but we started talking about, live versus pre-recorded, and he actually said, he goes, it baffles me that you prefer to do it live. I actually have a serious problem doing pre-recorded material where I can't think when they're like 3, 2, 1, okay, go. And I'm like, okay, because I'm thinking 3, 4, 5 times more than I should be about what I'm going to say next. When I'm live, I know there's no second chance. This is it.
Exactly.
Whatever awful thing I'm saying, whatever I just said that makes no sense to you, I said it. And I own it that way, and I could clarify it afterwards, but it really comes down to I don't feel the pressure when I'm live.
Yep.
And if I'm making mistakes, I could listen back and say, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore. Where with pre-recorded, you could edit out all those ums.
Yeah, exactly. And I did with my show for many, many years. I mean, I took my show early on out of the studio doing it live because it was difficult. But those couple of years that I was doing it live in the radio station exposed me to a whole nother side of broadcasting. And then, it really made me a better host. And then when I took my show and started to produce it more pre-produced, which is what I did for syndication reasons and a lot of reasons back then. But it also added a lot of labor to the production of our show. But I also think that it made the show probably a little bit better. I think because of the capabilities that we had to add conversations with other people and adding sound effects and things like that would have been very, very expensive to do on a live show. So I spent about $20,000 on a studio in my bedroom.
That's unbelievable.
And it was a professional quality studio. I had really great sound and had multiple computers and had Skype capability, and I could have as many as 5 people on the show at the same time.
Actually, while we're doing the show, for people just tuning in, I'm interviewing Rob Greenlee. He's a co-host of the New Media Show. Also, he is the, I'm going to get this right, Rob, content manager for podcasts for Zune and Windows Phone, right?
Yep.
There you go.
Exactly.
I got that right.
I've been doing that since 2007. Yeah.
A long time. That's how I know you. I know you from Windows Phone and Zune. You were the guy, the guy to contact for if you want your stuff on Windows Phone and Zune, and you still are. If anybody wants to get their content on there, they got to send you an email and do it that way.
Podcasts at Microsoft.com.
Is that it?
That's it.
Oh, actually, I got to update the IAIB blog post that we have because we made this top directory list, and we put an email address for you on there, but I guess I got to update it now because I don't have that one. There's a conversation happening in our chat room while we're doing this, and we were talking about the trends in podcasting, where it's headed. And I have noticed this happen more and more now, and I think it's great. I got to start doing it. I know a lot of other people are. They're taking their 1-hour show or 2-hour show. They're putting it out there on every possible platform as if it's a long-form podcast, but they're also cutting it up in segments. The most interesting parts of that show are now going on YouTube, for example. And they're having a link saying, like, if you want to watch the rest of the show, here you go. I think that's a great way to market your product now. And I've seen people do that more and more. Have you noticed that? Have you seen that trend happening? And how do you, other than it just being a giant billboard for your show, how do you create any kind of revenue based on those?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a challenge. And that is the same strategy that I did with my own radio show back in the early 2000s. But the difference was, so we would cut out the conversations with guests and create a separate segment, and then we'd write an article about it, and so we would post it off our website and then get it in Google and whatever, and people would read the article, and then they could click on the link to download that conversation, and listen to the audio portion of it. So that whole thing of trying to cut out pieces of your show and redistribute, I think, is a very valuable strategy to building an audience. And I think using YouTube is a great place to do that. I think also putting out an audio version of that, I think, is powerful as well. But selling advertising against it, I'm not really sure that necessarily that's going to work. Selling the advertising against just those segments. I think what you need to think about it is those are promos for your regular show that you have your sponsors in.
But do you think it could hurt the numbers for your show? I mean, here's an example.
No.
If I'm talking about the Xbox with Paul on the show, and I take that segment out, I chop it up, I put it on iTunes or whatever, on YouTube and Daily Motion, and people actually listen to them. We've gotten 100,000 views on that. Is it going to prevent people from going and listening to my entire show because now they got the information that they wanted?
I don't believe so. I think what you're doing is you're building a connection with people that are familiar with what you're producing in your show, and those are people that are going to come back and check out your full show the next time. You're basically, what you're trying to do is get into people's lives and make a connection. And then once that connection is made, then those people are more likely to come back and check out the other stuff that you're doing. I think it would be great if you could monetize that separately. I think it's maybe possible. But I think you can also look at it as just a promotional medium for your full show. And that's exactly what I did with my show. And I think it worked very, very well. In getting people to go to your website and to get people to check out the show and get to know you as a host.
We got a couple of minutes before we wrap up, but I do want to ask you about what your opinion is on a up-and-coming podcast or someone that just started doing a show. Give me a step-by-step on what they can do to market their show and to get the word out there, because it's very difficult. I mean, every day there are thousands of podcasts being created, and I mean the iTunes directory is just saturated with content, and so is Windows Phone. I mean, it's very difficult to kind of do a podcast and say, wow, okay, now what? Because I mean, when I started, even 2009, we did a show. iTunes picked it up, I mean, out of nowhere, and they featured it on the front page. That's a major, major help for someone that's starting out. But that's not happening anymore because you got the Joe Rogans and the Adam Carollas. And you know what? Yeah. All credit to them. And I do think they should be featuring those guys. But they are the big guys now. They're the priority. So what does a guy do?
Well, I think you're exactly right. It is difficult now to rise above the noise level. I mean, I have to say, when I started doing this back in the early 2000s, there wasn't a lot of noise. I mean, it was pretty much wide open. But now there's so many people doing it, and I think you have to start with the basics, I think, to get started with, and you just keep building on top of that and trying different things. I mean, it's a trial and error thing as well, because I believe online syndication and distribution is an ever-changing strategy. I don't think that there's one strategy that works anymore, because I think once that strategy is well known, then it gets saturated. So you always have to be looking for the next thing that nobody's tried before. So, and that's exactly what I did with my show back in the days. I kept trying different things to see what would work, and to go and get my show on platforms where I knew that there were listeners there. I think that's probably the number one thing to think about, is think about who you're trying to reach with your show. What does that person like to do, go, and where are they today? And then just make your show available there, and then promote like heck across the social media platforms, and the search engines, go into forums and contribute. And I mean, I think a lot of the strategies that I did were very much do the basics right, And I think now more than ever, I think you have to have outstanding cover art for your show.
Absolutely.
I think you have to have, professional level, high end, because if you're going to stand out against the Joe Rogans and the Adam Carollas, your show has to look better than those guys, if you can. And then your audio production or your video production needs to be high quality as well. I don't believe that it has to be perfect. I just think that it needs to be listenable or viewable, and not hard to watch or hard to listen. And I think you need to fill out your metadata in your feeds, so people that are scanning these aggregators can read a description of what the show's about and who the hosts are. I see so many shows coming through that just don't have any of that. And it's like in their cover art's kind of vague about what the show's about. I think your cover art has to sell your show. Think of your cover art as an advertisement for your show.
How's my cover art, Rob?
I think yours is great. I think it sells the show. I think cover art is a complex thing. It's some people take the positioning that the cover art's about selling, people on a show, and I think that's a good strategy. And then other cover art, which I would say your cover art is more in this area where you use artwork to portray the topic of the show, and I think that's powerful as well. I think that your art is great. I don't have any problem featuring your show, but I do. That's my most important thing that I look at, and I believe iTunes is the same. The cover art is the number one thing that they are interested in seeing in really, really high quality before they choose to feature a show. I think it's even higher than the content quality.
Absolutely.
But content quality kind of falls in second place to that too. So and it also needs think about your show as an event, I think, is the other part of it too, because I know that's how iTunes looks at it, and I know that's how I look at it. I'm always looking for events on people's shows.
Meaning current, something current, something topical.
Yeah, that and like a hot guest or a hot topic or something that's standoutable, not just your usual episode, right? That I can grab onto and feature and mention in the copy that I write to promote a show. So I think that's what drives it as well, and that's also what I did with my show back in the day too. Was have on like a key guest or somebody that was in the news, or actors from a hot TV show, or just something that could get you traction and get above the noise that's out there right now. I think is really, really important. And not all shows are in a position to really do that. But I think if you can, it can really, really rise the prominence or the visibility of your show. It's just you have to be in those places, and you have to be positioned to take advantage of those things.
And you brought up something interesting early on. You said getting it out there and going to the forums and going to the communities. And I feel that is a great way to get your name out there and kind of be recognized as someone that people want to listen to, because you have so many options now. I mean, obviously, we have the IAIB forum, which we have a huge amount of experts in every type of broadcasting genre you could think of, from content to video production to audio. So something like that, I mean, there are people on there that have become, pseudo-celebrities in the internet broadcasting world because of all the great advice that they're giving, and they're a trusted authority on a certain subject. The other great places to go are these Google groups, the Google community groups where, don't go in there and start spamming your show every week whenever you're live, but, present in a way where it's going to help someone. If there was a topical thing, like there are people that do podcasting shows. They talk about whatever it has to do with podcasting, and they'll run down a list of, best WordPress plugins to have on your site, and they'll have an audio version of that. That's informative and important to the community. I think something like that works. So once people get, recognize your name, they're going to trust your other stuff too. It's not as simple, like you said, it's not as simple as going and getting the right SEO and, taking a course on how to set up a radio station, set up your microphone, and there you go. Here are the thousands of viewers. That's not going to happen. It's just it's a different time now. Before we wrap up, though, you brought up Adam. I brought up Adam Carolla. Do you think these celebrities joining podcasting is a good thing or a bad thing for the community?
I think that it's always a good thing. I think they bring new listeners to the medium. I think if we had even more celebrities, I think it would be better. And I believe that that's the trend that we're seeing. Though I'm a little concerned. I think that like I say, this is probably a little bit of a controversial subject, but the whole thing of, I don't believe that the audience is quite there for podcasts that we need. I think that it's podcasting has continued to grow, but I think we still need to really focus on finding new people to tune into podcasts. And I think a lot of the problem has been is that all of the media and less so here recently have not really focused on the podcast medium as a place of content that's compelling, right?
Is it the fact that YouTube is known to be the place to get content, and it's an easy catchphrase for them to say to YouTube something or look it up on YouTube, where how do you the identity of what a podcast is still not clear to people.
Yeah, and that's part of the bigger picture of the problem that we're seeing. But I think we are coming into a golden age of podcasting where the distribution piece of this kind of gets taken out of the equation somewhat, and the focus starts to focus in on the content. And once we transition into that phase where kind of the whole distribution piece kind of takes care of itself, and we've reached a level where the distribution is good enough where anybody can get access. If it's integrated into the car and it's on all of your devices and it's easy to use, you can create playlists, it's easy. Then I think we're going to shift over to an area where it's all going to be all about the content. And I think that's kind of where we are with movies and TV.
To access content, the accessibility of these of a show is still very difficult to the average person. I mean, my mother-in-law has a hard time listening to me in the car. It's baffling to her that she was asking me the other day, I wanted to listen to your show. How do I do? I'm like, do you have the Stitcher app? No. Do you have TuneIn? No. Do you have this one? No. Okay, go to the iTunes store, download it. Okay, did you download it? Now you got to sign up. So put in your password and email. Okay, I did that. Okay, now confirm that you signed up. Okay, that's done. Now search for my show. Okay, and then now hit play, and then make sure that your Bluetooth is working so it plays it over the car. I mean, it's insane.
Yeah.
It's not until we reach the point where you go in the car, you start the car, you have it on preset 1 because at 3 o'clock I'm going to be on the air, and now you're streaming. That's when you're going to have mainstream crossover, in my opinion. And then content obviously is going to sell it, but we're still not at that point.
No, we're not, but I think we're getting close. I think
the
software in the devices that we have now have the capability, and I believe that the big platforms, Apple and Google and Microsoft, are working on this kind of smart agent kind of technology. That's kind of a legacy term, but what it really means is that your device learns about what you like to do on your device and delivers it in places and in situations where it knows you're going to want something like that, right? So when you get in the car, your device should recognize that you get in the car, and it will recognize that most of the time when you get in the car, you want to listen to a podcast, and it'll automatically look in your queue of subscriptions, and it will start playing your podcasts one after another. And now, granted, you can probably sort the order of it, but I think that's the key. Is it just needs to be like one button, or it automatically starts to happen once you go to a place where the phone knows that you do certain things.
It's a real fun time. I mean, we complain about the technological issues that we face still doing a podcast and doing internet broadcasting, but it is a real fun time to be doing this because it's like the Wild West out there. There's 500 different resources. There's all different ways of getting the same message across to your audience. There's 10 different ways of doing it the right way. And really, this is the infancy of this broadcasting style. Where we've gone beyond satellite radio and terrestrial radio, and this is it. but you know, there's no governing body, obviously, so it's going to be a free for all for a while.
Yeah,
and we don't want a governing body
for years.
Yeah, that's going to be, and you know what? That's the beauty of it. There is no governing body that says you can say this and you can't say this and you can't do this and you can't do that. They're leaving it up to us to figure out what works. And you know what? Then the industry follows whatever works.
Yeah, and I think that the radio broadcasting piece has been slow to join us, and I know I spend a fair amount of time each week having some conversations and talking with radio people because they have a lot of catching up to do on the broadcast side, and there's a lot of content there. There's a lot of local broadcast content that could do a much better job in building online distribution for their programs that has yet to happen. So I think that's the big change that we're going to see that may be the catalyst that really pushes this over the top. And if you look at broadcast radio, it's still a $16 billion business.
It is, and it's amazing because it's based on a free platform, which is, you know, radio. It's a free platform. You don't have to pay to do it, but they're afraid of giving it away on the internet, which is fascinating to me, which is another free platform to give away your content.
Yeah, that's right. But it's an opportunity for them too, and more of them are starting to understand that, and they're starting to think, wow, you know, there's some really great talent in the podcast area. Maybe we can tap into those folks for the broadcast side. And I definitely see that as a big movement going forward, as that these big radio networks will start looking at content that's coming out of podcasting as like a farm league for the big time, but big time will eventually be podcasting.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny how it's a full circle kind of thing, but I do see radio stations like even in the Seattle market, which is where I'm at. They're building out little podcast networks around their broadcast radio stations, and some of their shows are live on the air and podcasting, and then some shows are just a podcast, and some shows are they pull the hosts from the podcast and put them on the air to fill in for other people that, you know, I mean, you just see this crossover happening more and more with broadcast radio. I see all the time, and I talk to people that are, you know, the radio streaming technology people, and they're frustrated with the radio industry that they're not evolving and moving forward like they should be to be able to match what their audience wants them to do. And I think it's going to happen, and I think it's moving towards that way. And I think that the National Association of Broadcasters is, I think, moving towards more embrace of this area, just because I think they have to.
I agree with you 100%. With that said, Rob, we got to wrap it up. We're out of time. Gone over an hour. Look at that. I know we've got. Wow. You know what? I got to have you in here again because there's so much that I could talk to you about, and I'm trying to kind of pick every single topic that I want to talk to you about and kind of jam it into an hour show. But I got to have you in again to talk about specifics, you know, like content distribution and stuff like that, because there's so much that people still don't know with the rights and wrongs of podcasting. You know, when we talk about distribution, I'm a strong believer of getting your content everywhere, not just on one platform. But I've heard the other side of that argument as well. So we could talk about that too. But Rob, you do a show, new media show. You do it with Todd Cochran every Saturday. Every Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. And actually, this coming Saturday, we have a guest on that will be talking about being a local topic or local focused podcaster. So it should be a really interesting conversation. He's a longtime broadcast radio guy that's doing a podcast, but his content's all local. So that's how I started. I was the guys from Queens, and now I'm the GFK network. Yeah, I've gone national, Rob. I know you have. I've gone national, big time, big time, man. Big time syndication. You're going. You know, you're the next Howard Stern, I would say. Oh well, hopefully. I surely like his money. I'll tell you that. Listen, Rob, if you know anybody, forget about the $100 million a year. Just give me a couple mil. I'm fine with that. Just a couple mil. You'll be happy with just a year. Yeah, I won't complain. I'll take it. I won't ask for a big paycheck. I mean, just give me a couple mil a year and I'm fine. Just that's all right with me. Rob, yeah. Just
keep doing what you're doing, and you'll get that couple mil.
Yeah.
I'm confident of it. I'm confident of it.
Crossing my fingers. Rob Greenlee, you can follow him on Twitter. Rob Greenlee on Twitter. You could also, if you want your podcast on the Windows Phone marketplace, you can send them an email, podcast@microsoft.com. They'll get your show up on there. You also, which is really cool, what you do on Twitter, you feature up-and-coming podcasts and known podcasts every week in the Windows Phone store. So every week there's a new one, and you show it on your Twitter, which is great. I really like seeing that.
Yeah, it's also in the Zune software, which is still available, the Zune Marketplace software. It was actually put out there that the Zune Marketplace software is shut down, but that's not really entirely true. The death has been greatly exaggerated. So it's at Zune.net if you want to get the Zune software for if you're still running Windows XP or you're running Windows 7, you can still get the Zune software and get access to the complete podcast catalog.
Excellent. Also, if you guys are podcasting, you guys are internet broadcasting, and you want to meet other internet broadcasters, you want to ask a question, of course, you can go to our website, ibroadcastnetwork.org, which is the IAIB. We cover everything from podcasting news. We have blogs. We have articles. We also have a phenomenal forum of leading experts in podcasting and internet broadcasting on there. People are asking about, look, that's so funny, local advertising on your podcast. That's actually a thread on there right now, which is people are having a discussion. We had a big discussion about Wirecast versus VidBlaster if you're video streaming and you're doing video production. We have a great group of people there. You could go there, register, sign up, and ask away and introduce yourself, promote yourself, because we want to check out new podcasts on there. We encourage promotion. Also, if you miss any portion of the show, you can subscribe to us. We're on iTunes. We're on Windows Phone. We're on Zune. We are everywhere podcasts are available. You can subscribe to our audio and video portion of the show. And, of course, you can check it out on our website, gfqnetwork.com. We're going to be back next week, guys. We have a guest. We're going to announce it midweek. A really good guest, too. So stay tuned, and we'll let you know. Until next time, guys, take care.